So go ahead and get comfy and close your eyes if you like. And imagine that you are seeing a young woman walking through a dark wood. There's shadows in between the trees, and the wind is howling, and she's got her coat wrapped up close around her. And you can see something red-orange glowing in the palms that she has cupped out in front of her. And she has them lifted to her mouth, blowing on them gently. And in the distance, a cottage appears with warm light coming through the windows. And she walks up to the front door that opens for her. And she walks in and sees a warm, glowing hearth with a big stew pot bubbling, and women around the room with cloth and looms weaving and singing. And she's taken by the song, her heart is moved. And an old woman comes up to her and takes the ember from her hands and places it in the hearth, and puts a bowl of warm stew in her hands and asks her to sit and eat. And after she regains her strength, the young woman puts her hand in her pocket and pulls out a bundle of threads and tells the old woman, "I've been carrying these and collecting them from everywhere I've gone, and I don't know what to do with them." And the old woman just smiles and nods and takes them and gives them to the weavers. And after an hour or two, they hand her back a pair of mittens, of fingerless gloves that fit her perfectly, more beautiful than anything she's ever seen before. And the old woman takes an ember from the hearth and places it in her palms. And she turns and walks back out into the dark wood. The next day, a middle-aged woman comes to the door of the cottage. And she's disheveled and frazzled and anxious, her eyes darting around. She has burrs in her hair and animal fur and feathers stuck all over her clothes. And she says she is lost and doesn't know where she's going. And the old woman welcomes her in and notices that the woman is coughing and snorting, and when she does, there's ash coming out of her nose and her mouth. And she reaches inside of the woman's belly and pulls out a scoop of ash and places it in the fire and welcomes her to come and sit and eat a bowl of stew. And while she does, the old woman picks all of the burrs and animal fibers and feathers from her coat and her clothes and gives them to the weavers. And the next morning they present her the most beautiful shawl she's ever seen, that she wraps warmly around her shoulders. And the old woman reaches into the hearth and takes out an ember and places it in the older woman's belly, and she turns and walks out the door, back out into the dark wood. The next day, a very proper gentleman arrives at the door. He's wearing very fine clothes. He's been drawn by the light of the cottage and is admiring all of the weavings and the cloth that they've created. He asks the old woman how much it would cost for him to buy them. And he asks about what it would take for him to set up a shop like this for himself. The old woman offers him a bowl of stew, and he refuses. So she reaches inside of his chest and pulls out a hard, cold lump of coal and places it into the hearth. Then she takes the man's coat and rips apart the seams and unravels all of the thread and gives it to the weavers. In a moment, they give her back an apron, and she puts it on the gentleman and has him sit at the hearth and stir the stew pot. A month goes by, and the man is ready to eat some stew. The old woman reaches into the fire and places an ember in his chest and hands him a brand new pair of clothes. And he turns around and walks out of the house, back into the dark wood.